in 1957, 3 years after the monumental Brown v. Board of Education decision that mandated school integration across the country, Little Rock Central High School was thrust into the national spotlight. A years-long battle over public education ensued as a weary nation watched it all unfold. But even after the spotlight faded and the nation's attention shifted elsewhere, Little Rock remained in crisis. The following school year, in 1958, infamous Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus, a staunch segregationist who resisted school integration, made the unprecedented policy decision to close all high schools in the city, just a year after the Little Rock Nine were escorted by federal troops into the school building. In the midst of a heated debate over education, integration, and intolerance, a group of influential and socially prominent white women decided to fight back. Using their social status, the members of the Women's Emergency Committee to Open Our Schools changed the conversation and debate around racial integration in the South forever.
Little Rock, Arkansas, and the first phase of the trouble. The white population are determined to prevent colored students from going to the school their own children attend. Picketing the school, they clash with the police.
Many are familiar with the struggles that the Little Rock Nine faced during their infamous integration of Central High School. After repeated attempts to prevent their entry by segregationist leaders, and in the midst of intense community backlash, President Eisenhower intervened. Though the 9 students at Central did successfully enter the school, they were never fully accepted by those around them, and while national media and advocacy groups left Little Rock, the crisis worsened as time progressed. During the summer following integration and after calling a special session, Faubus signed a new law and announced the closure of Little Rock's 4 public high schools in order to prevent desegregation.
I have ordered closed the senior high schools of Little Rock in order to avoid the impending violence and disorder which would occur and to preserve the peace of the community.
The schools wouldn't reopen until the fall of 1959. But the individuals who made that reopening possible are often footnoted by accounts that simply ignore the year following the school closures. The bitter debate over desegregation did not end after integration and even continued long after the schools shut down. As a direct result of the school closures, thousands of students and teachers were displaced. Families scrambled to find alternative methods of instruction, and some fled the city entirely. Black residents were hit the hardest since they had nowhere else to go. During the fall of 1958, at the beginning of what would become known as the Lost Year, public education was used as a political tool by Faubus as a means of stopping integration, and this absence of true moral and political leadership created the perfect opportunity for someone new to join the debate.
The men have failed. It's time to call out the women. Adolphine Fletcher Terry.
Adolphine Fletcher Terry, the daughter of a wealthy businessman and former Confederate soldier, was born in Little Rock in 1883. At age 15, she pursued higher education that would expose her to progressive ideas about race. After graduating, one friend recalls she seemed ready to change the world, and that she kept trying until her dying day to do it. She led struggles for suffrage and advocated for public education, and she was no stranger to tough political debates.
Mrs. Terry, she writes in her diary that she was shocked and flabbergasted at what had happened in the city with the federal troops, with the Faubus's actions. And she ends this little section of her diary. She says, "Where has the better class been while this has been concocted? Shame on us."
On September 16, 1958, just days after Faubus had announced the school closures, 58 women met at Terry's antebellum mansion to discuss their concerns with his actions. She formed the Women's Emergency Committee to Open Our Schools and vowed to fight for education and the limited integration originally proposed by the school district. The women had to act fast. According to the laws passed by the legislature previously, a referendum election had to be held in Little Rock in order to determine the future of public education in the city.
It was 30 days after they closed the schools. Faubus had to have a referendum, and the ballot said you are for integration or you are against integration. It didn't say anything about the schools being closed.
In the end, voters strongly affirmed Faubus's actions, supporting school closures overwhelmingly. But the Women's Emergency Committee didn't back down. After discovering over 7,000 new supporters at the polls, they were emboldened in their opposition to Faubus and the legislature. Their membership grew, and they organized like never before. They also recognized the need to reframe the debate and shift the focus away from racial issues in favor of public education. The women publicly distanced themselves from the Little Rock Nine and other black leaders. They retained a large connection with business interests instead. In one of the group's official documents, they declared,
"We stand neither for integration nor for segregation, but for education."
And herein lies one of the organization's most fundamental flaws. The first action taken by the group as a whole was to bar black women from joining the committee. Some claim this action was necessary, while others argue it was an example of elitism within the group.
From the beginning, the Women's Emergency Committee, the Stop Campaign, the businessmen who run for the school board in 58, they all make it clear they are not for integration. They don't care about integration. If they're going to have integration, they're going to have limited integration, and they're going to figure out ways to prohibit large number of African American children going to school with white children.
Still, the women's social status played a large role in shielding them from harsh economic impacts as well as some social ostracism, and it also allowed them to go on the offensive in their debate against the segregationists. They wrote letters to local newspapers and urged clergy members to preach in favor of education. Organizational engagement was effective too.
Sensing mounting opposition, the governor ordered that their records and membership rolls be seized by authorities, even threatening to have non-compliant women thrown into jail. While Faubus failed, this clearly demonstrates his attempt to shut down the debate, just like he shut down the schools. The group's most prominent members also faced vicious hate mail, intimidating phone calls, and even threats of physical violence. As such, most women worked in secret for fear of political or social retribution.
They were incredible. They were always my heroes. I just didn't know who they were.
In May of 1959, the group was tasked with their biggest challenge yet. The school board, composed of 3 segregationists and 3 moderates, attempted to terminate the contracts of 44 teachers whom the members deemed integrationists or those tied to radical race mixers in groups like the NAACP. A group of concerned citizens soon formed STOP, or Stop This Outrageous Purge, in order to combat the school board's actions. Along with the nearly 2,000 new members of the WEC, the STOP campaign waged a public debate against segregation in a way that drew more attention than ever before. The opposition was organized too. Groups like the Mothers League of Central High and the Committee to Retain Our Segregated Schools sided with segregation. As a part of the final battle in Little Rock's integration crisis, all 6 members of the school board faced a special recall election. In the end, after weeks of organizing, the women, along with coordinating organizations, garnered just enough support to remove the 3 segregationist members and retain the 3 moderates. This allowed for the peaceful reopening of integrated public schools later that fall. After risking it all, they had won.
The high school kids are back in school in Little Rock, in famous Central High and in the other schools. And this time, it looks as if they'll stay there. You have to say that a majority of Little Rock's people now want their schools open, even if they have to swallow a little integration to keep them open.
But how will history remember their large contribution to Little Rock's integration debate? And how can we all shape their story in a way that celebrates their accomplishments without discounting their shortcomings? After all, Little Rock still has a lot to learn from lessons of history that are passed down through generations of individuals who continue to fight against intolerance. Still, the city is forever scarred by the effects of its integration, and to this day, the state government continues to exert enormous control over local schools. However, it's clear the city has come a long way too. Nowadays, Central High School stands as a testament to the tenacity of the Little Rock Nine. But hidden inside of its hallowed halls, the long-forgotten legacy of the lost year still seems to echo as time moves on. If anything, the school remains unsettlingly ordinary. History is seemingly written a new chapter, all thanks to the courageous leadership of the Women's Emergency Committee. After all, there is nothing particularly special about these women. There was nothing unique about this place. But in the right moment and at the right time, they chose to debate in favor of justice and opportunity for all people, and that is something that will never be lost.
You know, you can live anywhere, and if you pay attention, you may learn something that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. You know,